Hello from the 24/7 Sports Studios here in Nashville, Tennessee, alongside our transfer portal expert, Chris Hummer, and Bud Elliott of the Cover 3 podcast. I'm Emily Proud, and we come to you with some big news. We have released our brand new transfer portal rankings. This is the last one that we will do, so this is the most important. And the big news is that we have two brand new 5-stars. That is Texas wide receiver transfer A.D Mitchell and LSU transfer cornerback Denver Harris. I want to start with the guy ahead of A.D Mitchell, and that is our number 2 player. Why is Harris one of the top players in the portal this year?
If you look at Denver Harris on the field last season for Texas A&M, when he was on the field, and that's a key qualifier there, he was one of the best cornerbacks in the SEC as a true freshman. That is extremely difficult to do, and he lived up to that billing. The problem was he couldn't stay on the field. He had some parking lot issues, some Instagram Live issues, and some additional issues that resulted in him being suspended from the program and leaving. But based on everything I've heard at LSU this spring, he's been very good. He's kept his nose clean, which is critical with Denver Harris. And if he keeps his nose clean and he plays and he's healthy, he's going to be a first-round pick eventually. He's that good. He was a 5-star in the 2023 class in the 2022 class for a reason. And I think he's headed for a huge year this year for LSU.
No doubt about it. Think about the receivers LSU has to play this year, right? Evan Stewart from his former team, the Aggies. And on the opening weekend, Labor Day, he's going to have to square up against either Keon Coleman or Johnny Wilson for the Seminoles, and a number of other top SEC receivers as well. Trey Harris at Ole Miss from La Tech. LSU needs this guy to come in and play like he played last year and play the entire season. There's nothing in his physical profile to indicate that he shouldn't still be rated really highly. And if he keeps his nose clean, as Hummer said, he's going to be a first-round type pick.
We saw a lot of wide receivers move around this offseason, transferring all over the place, but the guy that we chose as the number 1 wide receiver is A.D Mitchell. Chris, you're part of those ranking calls. Why?
Well, Stetson Bennett said it best last year. He said A.D Mitchell was the best wide receiver in college football, and that's not hyperbole if you follow what A.D Mitchell did in the college football playoff. Mitchell was a stud in the games last year. He made a huge difference for Georgia. He might not have been the best wide receiver on the field. That was Marvin Harrison in the semifinals, but he made a huge difference for Georgia the last 2 seasons when it mattered most. And if he can be healthy with that knee injury, he's going to have a huge year for Texas. Sources in Austin were they were so high on A.D Mitchell this spring, and I think he's headed for a huge season.
I mentioned all the great wide receivers we saw move around in the portal. Texas in particular has a pretty stacked room. Is A.D Mitchell the best receiver there?
I think he could be. Let's think back to November of last year around Thanksgiving, and what were we hearing from our insiders at Dogs 247? Hey, A.D Mitchell is getting healthier. He didn't play much last year, right? He had some injury stuff. He's killing our defense in practice, and that's the Georgia defense that sends almost its entire 2-deep to the Philadelphia Eagles every year in the draft. So I think that's a really positive indicator in addition to what Hummer had heard. But is he the best receiver on Texas? They took Isaiah Naylor last year, who blew his ACL, but now he's coming back. And they also have Xavier Worthy, who's a big-time deep threat if he catches the ball consistently. So I think the fact that we're debating whether A.D Mitchell is the best receiver on Texas probably shows just how loaded that Texas room can be.
Another great receiver in our top 247 top 10 is UNC transfer wide receiver Devontez Walker. He's also our fastest riser. You see the green next to him, and 22 spots up for Walker in these rankings. What did Drake May just add to his arsenal, Chris?
Well, I think Drake May was one of the happiest people in college football when that commitment became official, because somebody had to replace Josh Downs, who has been one of the best receivers in college football the last couple of years, and Devontez Walker is an excellent player to do it. He can do a lot. If you look at his numbers 2 years ago, he's one of the best deep threats in college football, averaged almost 23 yards per catch. And last year, with a more expanded role and a more expanded route tree in Kent State's system, he still blew it up. He's one of the best receivers in the MAC. For my money, he probably was the best receiver in the MAC last year. And the word out of Chapel Hill this spring is he's had an amazing spring. I think Devontez Walker could lead the ACC in receiving yards this year, with Drake May throwing him the ball and the opportunities he'll have. So I think he's headed for a huge year.
He absolutely could. Look on screen at the highlights we're watching here. The teams he's making plays against, it's not just Kent State. It's not just the MAC. Kent State played Georgia, Oklahoma, and Washington last year, and he had highlights on our package from all 3 of those ballgames. So we know we can play at a high level. I think what he did in the spring confirmed it, and that probably played a large part in the decision to keep Drake May at North Carolina, because there were definitely programs that would be interested in Drake May had he hit the portal.
Many rumors, but Drake May stays at UNC. Let's move down to our top 20, and we're starting to see a few guys that moved in this most recent spring portal window, starting with Bear Alexander. We know defense was a big need for USC, Bud. What do they add with Bear?
So you got a guy that can play the 1-tech, the 3-tech, a big-time body, quick twitch, physical. He's a dude who can impact that defense. And we've seen Lincoln Riley have a lot of success before with just a decent defense. That's all they need at USC. They have Caleb Williams, a generational quarterback. Think back to that Rose Bowl when Riley was the head coach at Oklahoma, and they took Georgia down to the wire, that Georgia team that eventually played for the national title game. I think Bear Alexander gives him a difference maker in the middle if he can play like he did in the national title game and allow them to get enough stops, get the ball back in Caleb Williams' hands, score 50, give up 30, win a bunch of ball games.
Absolutely. Bear Alexander had 2 tackles for loss in the national championship game. He stepped up when it mattered most. And this is absolutely the type of body Alex Grinch needs to make this defense better. If USC had an even average defense a season ago, they would have been the college football playoff. They might have won the national championship with an average defense, given how historic Caleb Williams was on a per down basis. And bringing in Bear Alexander along with some of their other transfers really puts USC in a position to maybe be an average defense next year. That's really all Alex Grinch and Bear Alexander in this group need to be. They need to be average, and Bear Alexander is anything but average from a talent perspective. So this is a massive pickup for USC's chances this year.
Another player in that top 20, a former Michigan State wide receiver, Keon Coleman, heading to Portal U in Florida State. What did Mike Norvell just add, Bud?
He got a guy that if you're going to double Johnny Wilson on the other side, you're going to pay for it dearly. Keon Coleman is an elite contested catch guy. He's a good deep ball route runner, a guy who also was athletic enough to play on Michigan State's basketball team, and that's obviously a very quality basketball program there in East Lansing. I think he's actually more capable of running some of the routes than maybe he showed at Michigan State this year, but if you combine Keon Coleman with the 2 nice transfer portal tight ends that Florida State brought in and Johnny Wilson on the other side, that's a lot of size you have to defend with ability for a team that's already good at running the football. So kind of pick your poison.
I love this duo. I don't think it's the best wide receiver duo in college football with Keon Coleman and Johnny Wilson, but it is going to be one of the more difficult ones to deal with. As Bud said, size is a thing, and Keon Coleman and Johnny Wilson together are 2 of the best contested catch players in college football. Their contested catch rate is outstanding. And Jordan Travis, who doesn't need a ton of help, he's a pretty accurate guy on his own, is going to be able to just throw the ball up and have people make plays for him at times. And Jordan Travis is somebody who creates plenty of plays on their own. And as Bud said, if you add that to all the other talent in their running back room and their tight end group, it's going to be really difficult to deal with Florida State this year. This was just kind of cherry on top is an overused kind of saying, but this really was the cherry on top for Florida State. They didn't need Keon Coleman to be good this year, but this really emphasizes their push to compete for a national championship this year, compete with Clemson, and I think this really helps them in their effort to do so.
I joked that Florida State is transfer U, but they have worked many years on building that title. But Colorado and Deion Sanders really trying hard to rip it away from them. The amount of transfers we saw at Colorado, they are our #1 transfer team. You see 50 total transfers in. You compare that to 56 portal losses, so a lot of change in Colorado for the Buffs. And you can't talk about the transfer portal without talking about Colorado. Chris, what impresses you or intrigues you the most about what Coach Prime did this offseason?
I mean, this is an unprecedented change in college football. We're seeing a roster turnover almost 80% of its players. So that's what intrigues me the most. I have no idea how this is going to be. I was talking to a team that plays Colorado earlier in the season, and they were like, I don't even know where to start my advanced scouting because their roster wasn't set until like last week. So it's going to be really interesting to see how it goes. I think Colorado's roster is probably better 1-85, but there's a lot more that goes into building a locker room than just having the best players. You have to have a culture. You have to have players come together. You have to have players want to play with each other. So I'm just very curious about how this is going to work.
And I think like they took 50 transfers. There's only 22 starting spots. How are you pitching this to guys? Hey, come transfer in to be a backup. We've never really seen a team that had to take this volume of transfers before. So I'll be interested to see, how does their depth look, right? Did they hit on depth at all these spots, or maybe they got some spots where, I don't know, the guy they got to come in to be the backup isn't so good. But I think the top level players they got are a massive upgrade over what Colorado had last year at most spots.
Yeah, among those 50 incoming transfers, 6 of them we have ranked in our top 247. So there is some quality, but definitely quantity when it comes to what Coach Prime did at Colorado in this offseason. So they are one of the winners of the portal, obviously, with how many guys they're bringing in. But I want you guys to pick a few more winners. Chris, starting with you.
I'm going to go quarterbacks. It is a good time to be a college football quarterback because you don't have to go to the NFL to get paid. You can stay and get paid. And we saw a guy like Sam Hartman do that. Sam Hartman was going to probably be a late round draft pick at most. And he's going to Notre Dame and he's getting paid. I can assure you of that. Devin Leary's doing the same thing at Kentucky. Like Devin Leary wanted to go to the NFL, but he's going to Kentucky. He's going to stay another year in college and he's getting paid to do so. You could look back at Bo Nix, who decided to stay this year. Michael Penix made the same decision. You had a couple G5 quarterbacks like Frank Harris, Michael Pratt that could have moved on. They're getting paid to stay. So if you're a quarterback who is a late round draft pick potentially, you have a lot of leverage in this era. So I think they're the winner. They're all getting compensated for their time.
But who's your pick for a winner of the portal season?
I'm going to go with Auburn, right? So Auburn is a team that they fired Brian Harsin. They bring in Hugh Freeze. Brian Harsin recruited poorly over the last few years, especially by Auburn standards, by SEC West standards. So the roster that Hugh Freeze inherited there is not good, right? And if they did not do major work in the portal, Auburn could have finished dead last in the SEC West with a bullet. And they may still finish dead last in the SEC West. I'm not sure. There's a lot of good football teams in that division, but they've gone out. They got 2 tackles, right? They got the best center in the portal in Avery Jones. They landed some really nice pass catchers. I think they made some difference what they did on the defensive line with Rogers and also your Appalachian State transfer. They get Peyton Thorne to come in and at least establish some competence there at the quarterback position. I think Auburn has upgraded probably a full win or two better than what they would have been had they not gone to the portal. If they don't portal, I mean, they could be 3-9. Now they could threaten 7-5.
All right, that is just a taste of the analysis and the coverage that we have of the transfer portal. You can check out a ton of stuff over on the 24/7 Sports YouTube channel. Also, check out the full rankings on 247sports.com.